Hello, my name is Felice Prince, and the topic I chose for my research seminar was the effects of financial literacy inadequacies in examining the wealth gap between African Americans and Caucasian Americans. Um, so I'm just going to go into a little bit of detail of why I chose this topic. One, because it's kind of significant for me to my life. Growing up from ages, I guess, from me being born to about 8 years old, my parents and I, we grew up in an impoverished community, and I noticed the lack of financial literacy rates, increased welfare recipients, fatherless homes, and a variety of other things that made me wonder why things were the way they were. But of course, as a little girl, I didn't really understand. When I would go over my friend's house, I would observe that, or when I would go to the store, I would notice that their mother was paying with food stamps and stuff like that. And some of my friends didn't have fathers in the house and all sorts of things. And you can just tell, or I guess through observation, that there was an extreme lack of financial literacy in the homes. And even as a little girl, this was disturbing to actually witness. My household was not broken as bad because both of my parents were working. Um, my mom was going to school to become a registered nurse, and what she's been doing for over 23 years now. And it was just very, very different. And it wasn't until the age of 8 or 9, that we moved into a suburban community. And I start to notice things. I went over. I made friends in the neighborhood and went over some of my friends' house that lived on the same street as us. And when I went over there, I would ask, like, what does your mom do? What does your dad do? And it turns out they were doctors, lawyers, and all sorts of other amazing things. So this was a huge observation jump from what I noticed from where I was previously living. And it seems like the opportunities in which we were provided in the suburban community were quite different than that of the impoverished community. And that is kind of what sparked my love for wanting to teach people in finance and help more people become financially literate, or at least those who don't have the pleasure to have the proper education or become financially literate, especially those in third world countries. Eventually, that's something I would like to get into. But anywho, so with this study, I used data from the National Financial Capability Study. And I used from years 2018, 2019, 2012, and 2009. Unfortunately, those were the only 4 years they had available, so I had to go with what I had. But aside from that, they surveyed a lot of different people. There were, I want to say, 25 plus thousand per each survey. And out of the surveys, they all had the same questions every year, which was really great because it helps to see, those historical patterns and things of that sort. And out of the variables that were examined, I chose 8 specific ones that I felt would really stand out in my research proposal to help really distinguish and really, really stress why there's a wealth gap between African Americans and Caucasian Americans in America. So I'm going to go ahead and list all of the variables I chose and why I chose them. So I chose age, I chose ethnicity, I chose household income, I chose being knowledgeable about saving and investing, children's college fund, credit score, having a bank account, and retirement plans. Okay. The first reason I chose age is because I believe, it's necessary to want to know how old the surveyors were, the people that were being surveyed, just to see just to kind of get a fit of where they are in life, and, how knowledgeable they are at this specific age, or 20 to 25, or 30 to 34. I think that's very, very necessary because that lets kind of where they are mentally. And it lets us know if they were kind of taught early and whatnot. But the second one I chose was ethnicity, and of course, because I'm doing this to distinguish and basically amplify the reason that there's a wealth gap in America. And again, I believe that most of this has to do with a lot of these variables. And some of it, I believe, is generational as well. That'll also be discussed in my paper. So I left out the number of children, even though that would have been an amazing variable as well. I left that one out. But household income. Household income specifically correlates with financial literacy rates. If you think about it, people who don't know how to invest in the stock market, don't know how to create another source of income, or don't know how to do something that'll make them financially well off, are less likely to have a higher income. And you notice that it seems like household income being the upper level or upper class, those people were more financially literate than the people in the lower class. Okay, and I think that makes a huge difference. And as a matter of fact, a lot of that difference comes from people in the upper class investing in the stock market and creating wealth for themselves, as and people in the lower class, I don't know if they don't know about it, and it seems from this research study that a lot of them just aren't aware of it. They aren't aware of how to do it, and they aren't aware of their options to build wealth for generations to come in their family. And the fourth one I chose is being knowledgeable about saving and investing. Okay, I think that alone will stress the importance of why there's a wealth gap there. Like I just said, because mostly the upper class is very knowledgeable about investing, and I think that's a huge area in which why there's a wealth gap, because there's no saving and investing in the lower class as you see in the upper class, in the middle class. Okay, I also kind of make a point about the middle class and how some people rumor it to be, eventually being phased out because you're either here or you're there. But that's here nor there. But that is something I do mention in my paper, um, or research proposal. And then having a children's college education fund. I think that's very vital, because I think you can only do what you're knowledgeable about. If you're not knowledgeable about, why it's important for your child to have a college fund, or if you, let's say you don't want to send them to college, or even a business fund or something like that, that won't be present in your finances. You won't see that in someone who doesn't know anything about that. Okay. And again, I think a lot of that has to do with being passed down from generation to generation, because as a child, my mother taught us the importance of, having a college fund or something like that, so that we're not spending so much on student loans and things of that sort. Um, and then we have credit score. Credit score is very, very vital, because credit score allows one to examine the level of financial literacy. Is someone who has an amazing credit score, I'm assuming they, maybe they invest in the stock market, they have great savings, they have great payment history and things of that sort, as opposed to someone you see that doesn't have a great credit score. They're defaulting on loans, they're defaulting on car payments, they're defaulting on credit card payments, and all sorts of other things that could potentially lead them to having a troubling credit score. And the seventh one I chose is having a bank account. Believe it or not, people in the lower class, they have bank accounts, but sometimes, most of the time, and this is just through observation, a lot of their bank accounts are like prepaid bank accounts, like with Ace Cash Express or something like that. Whereas, my upper class friends, they actually have bank accounts with real banks like Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, Key Bank, and all sorts of other sorts of, amazing banks that are real established banks and not prepaid banks. And I think that's why they asked that question in that survey study, because that's actually important. Like I said, if you notice the difference, and sometimes it could even be that they had a nice bank account at one point, because I've seen this as well, and then now they no longer have access to that bank because they've overdrafted, or they owe the bank all sorts of fees or something like that. So again, bottom line, having a valid bank account from an established bank is a sign of being financially literate. Okay? And the very last option I chose was retirement plans. Again, this goes back to, if you don't know something, you won't be able to actually look into it and invest in something. People who have retirement plans realize that you have to retire one day, or you're going to grow old, and it's essential that you have money put in place for when you do retire, so that you're not working for the rest of your life. And then you see people in the lower class, and who, a lot of them surveyed that they don't even know about a retirement plan. and which is very interesting because these people are more likely to work for the rest of their life because they don't have any sort of security put in place for them to stop working at some point to relax because they have money put up, but they don't. So in the event of this, this causes issues, and again, this causes this endless cycle of not being financially literate because you're not educating yourself and becoming more articulate on how you can build wealth for your family. And like I said, there's retirement, there's stock market investing, there's, if you're into trading, all sorts of options in which you can choose to make yourself better off or make your family better off. But either way, this concludes my video presentation. But these are all of the variables in which I discussed in my research proposal, and thank you.